Cutting. There we are. Happy, what is it? Tuesday, I think.
Tuesday again.
It feels like Friday, but it is Tuesday, yeah. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another freshly squeezed episode of PK's on Air. I'm back, and I brought someone.
I'm back as well.
Good to have you back on the stream as well. Yeah, I had a good chat with Arnold last week. To be fair, but it's good to have you back. Yeah, I saw you kind of sneaked into the comments quickly, so that was it made me grin. But we had a good session on. I think a lot of interesting things around not only analytics but also CRO and some other aspects, but mainly
reading
data.
Books, right?
And reading books, and reading books. Arnold had at least an answer for me, so that was good. Even though I have to admit, I think I heard the title before, but have not I didn't read that myself either. So yeah, I put it on the list. Let's see if I ever make it through the list. But at least that's. I think it's a start. So that is very true. But yeah. So as always, the recap is on pa.ag/notes if you kind of want to have a quick look. Not only that one, but essentially all the previous episodes as well. So if you want to kind of have a look, poke around, there's some topics that are still very much relevant, I would say. Also specifically kind of on iOS and the recent changes. The release was just now, was it 1.5 weeks ago or something like that. So yeah, I think a lot of the content is not only relevant when we kind of stream it, but also kind of as a reference afterwards. So feel free to have a look. And then of course also this week's show we're gonna put there, because this week we have a whole bunch of links and things and news and stuff that kind of happened over the last 4-5 weeks, more or less. So basically everything kind of in April that we're going to cover. There was a bunch of things happening. It feels a bit slower than, March was kind of crazy. So I think that's to be expected. However, there were some really interesting articles, and of course also some stuff that kind of Google pushed out. So we're gonna go through that. Before that, I think it's also almost a bit of a kind of institution by now. Maybe a quick recap on events. So we had I think there was SMX Create, where our very own Charlie spoke on ad copy and some of the things that go wrong kind of in that area, and that was very, very received, which kind of made us go back and decide and ask her basically if she would want to kind of join us for one of the episodes. So I think that's going to happen, if I'm not wrong. I don't have the schedule in my head, but I think she's joining us when? Do you know?
She's joining us next week already.
Next week already. Cool. Yeah, very nice. So next week is going to be a bit more like a PPC episode for those that care, but not necessarily only PPC, right? Ad copy in general, I think. So if you're kind of into anything paid media, I would say, I think then it's going to be very much relevant to you. So yeah, Charlie's going to kind of share some of her thoughts from SMX Create. And then I spoke as well. There was an event that I was actually supposed to go last year, kind of pretty much when the pandemic hit. I think it was scheduled for May as kind of the first edition Digital Marketing Conference Europe. It's called, was supposed to be in Lithuania, actually. So that kind of made me want to go, because I think I've never been there, actually. So that's always good. If you run a conference and you find a location where I've not been, then chances are high that I might be willing to. But to be fair, I think right now I would probably pretty much go everywhere. It doesn't really matter.
True.
As long as I could travel and have an excuse to travel on business, then I'm there. No worries. I think that was different in 2019. I don't know how many flights I did, but way too many. So I was a bit more selective, but I think, good chance. I think that's true. Actually, I was speaking to a lot of colleagues, and everyone said, whenever we can travel, it doesn't matter, just get us over. So I think if you run a conference in person at any point in time, then I would say chances are high that you get people to even, like speakers, even to travel, even though they might have not done that before. So I thought that quite funny. Yeah. So, but that was good. It was actually a new software, a new platform, and if I recall correctly, I mean, we kind of had this episode where Alexandra joined us actually, where we kind of spoke about like virtual events and hybrid events, right? And I mean, she kind of talked a bit about like the different platforms and platform experiences and whatnot. And I'm not really sure, actually, maybe you recall, but did she mention Pine as a platform, like Pine?
I cannot recall now.
I couldn't recall either. I was pleasantly surprised with the platform, I have to say. Quite solid, a bit similar to Hopin that we kind of talked about in the past as well. And I think we both have been using it also for like SMX and whatnot. So yeah, but I haven't used Pine, which made a pretty solid impression, I have to say as well. So yeah, event was good. Like quite a lot of content in parallel, but I think that was due to the fact that they kind of made it free to attend at some point in time, obviously. Yeah, so I kind of talked a bit about like e-commerce SEO specific challenges. I think that's one of the things that we see a lot, that there's like a lot of like, you know, how I'd say like vertical specific issues. I think that we see in, you know, in audits, and that people kind of struggle with when they're using different like platforms and whatnot. So I kind of decided to dedicate a session to that, which went really well. I was quite pleased, actually. So quality of the stream was good. Like a couple of hundred people dialed in, so that was really nice. And we had a panel, which was also quite fun, with Dixon Jones, who you might know from his previous kind of job at Majestic, a tool that we love a lot. And then there was who else was there? Yeah, Jason Bernard, who does a lot of like stuff around with CaliCube around like entities and stuff like that. And there was Viola Eva from Berlin as well. So yeah, it was a funny round. And even though it was very early in the morning, we had like I think over 100 people just for a panel, which I think is quite rare, especially on virtual events, right? So it was good.
True.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised for like a first edition of an event. They did well. So yeah, that was
Sounds
there.
Great.
Yeah, no, it was good. And then I think I've lost a bit of track, actually, what's next on the event schedule for us. But I think our friends in Paris, so there's an event called Search Y that also obviously kind of due to the pandemic didn't happen last year. But I think I spoke there, or was it last year actually? Early 2020? Yeah, must have been early 2020. Yeah. So anyway, they are back with like a technical kind of like dedicated event, if you so will, on tech SEO topics, which is going to happen in June, virtual again. So yeah, that's I think one of the things that I'm quite looking forward to, because as
so
we
the
all
conference
know,
before has been like way broader, and now they have
dedicated. Exactly. It was broader. Well, I think what they did in the like at the time was it was partially French and then like some international speakers as well. So it was a bit of both. Similar to what we kind of know from events in like, you know, Turkey and other countries, where they then also have like translation kind of stuff on the ground. So like simultaneous translation, which is always an interesting experience, I have to say. But hey, yeah, so that's what happened. And I think this time it's solely virtual. And I think they split it on like, you know, one section being French and one section being kind of international. So for those kind of that attend from that only speak, you know, French, that they kind of have it a bit easier to follow, which I think is always a challenge on those countries that do not primarily kind of speak English. I mean, it's the same in German, right? I mean, Germany has literally only German events. I mean, except for SMX Munich, which is kind of again a bit mixed, but the rest is like, yeah. So a bit of the same concept there, I think. But I'm quite curious on that one. Yeah, I think that's kind of the events situation, if I'm not totally mistaken. So yeah, we already mentioned next week PPC on Peak Ace on air. So that's gonna be good. And then for the episode after, I think we are still working out what we're gonna do, to be honest. So we'll let you know next week. There's an idea, and I have a I have a guest in mind that I want to join, but I'm not sure if we can pull it off. So we shall see how it goes.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. All right. So enough of that. I see there's still people dialing in, but yeah, if you, from wherever you joined, like feel free to drop us a comment, say hello, wherever you are. Kind of appreciate that. Of course, equally questions, feedback, and whatnot. Meanwhile, I'm gonna put up the screen share, and then we can have a bit of a look on things that happened. Yeah, there we go. That happened in the last couple of weeks, because yeah, as I said, there was a lot. And I think one of the things that just happened, was it a week ago, is an interesting one, and I just wanted kind of to share it because I found it quite amusing, to be honest. So like Google Search Central pushed out a tweet saying, look, like last year we began a pilot program for site owners to report urgent bugs or other issues related to Google search, beginning with, security issues. That program has worked well, blah, 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 blah. So we're expanding it to handle indexing issues. And I was like, that is interesting. So, of course, and there's kind of followed by, and I'm not going to read through the entire thread, but like it's followed by like, a whole bunch of like more generic recommendations, right? So kind of go to Search Console and try to fix it there, and then go to like the kind of community forums, which frankly, I've never really even used. I mean, I like the, so what works, I think, quite well is engaging with Googlers on Twitter in general. And I think they do a phenomenal job there to really reply and provide context. On the forums, I oftentimes felt like just by consuming it, to be fair, that doesn't work so well. But anyhow, so that's that. And then the reason why I actually so there's like this button now, because like, look, I have an indexing issue. And I'm wondering how much stuff is going to kind of go through that, and what is really relevant or not. And I think I saw a post by our good friends from Systrix. I'm not sure it was on Facebook or on Twitter, but I saw it somewhere. And I think Johannes Beuys, the kind of founder of Systrix, said something along the lines, it was a German post though, but I think he said something along the lines, it's quite nice to have a button that doesn't do anything, literally, or doesn't do nothing. So I was really grinning when I saw that. And I think, well, I wouldn't go as far as and say, well, that's certainly what they're going to do. But on the other hand, I'm really like wondering, how much relevant reports come in, right? I mean, can you imagine the amount of people that don't have a clue about SEO, and then they're gonna use Search Console, right? Exactly, right? They use Search Console and then just kind of push the button, like, I have indexing issues, and I think there's so many things that can go wrong, right? Is it even an indexing issue? Is it even an issue at all, right? Is it just like because I don't
more generic, right?
So, I was really laughing when I saw that. I was like, I didn't really understand the motivation behind it, but maybe then again, like we're underestimating them in a way, like Google in a way, and say, look, okay, maybe they kind of have such a clever pre-filtering in place. I don't know. I found it certainly interesting in that regard, because, well, I think let's leave it with that. But I really had to laugh about the kind of the post from Johannes on that, because I was like, this is how that was my initial reaction without actually like saying anything, was like, yeah, of course, you have now an indexing issue button. We shall see how that evolves.
Would be interesting.
I would love to see the statistics behind that. Honestly, like how much is being used? What's the response rate? 0.00001% or something like this. So, yeah. Anyhow, so that's new. That's one of the new things that Google pushed out. There was a bunch of others, but yeah, we get to this. So another post of my very good friend Aleda Solis, actually, like she's the amount of stuff that this woman is pushing out is just absolutely insane. I'm honestly baffled. Like really cool. So deserves a mention here for sure. So this time she kind of created like a keyword map. She called it like keywords mapping cheat sheet, basically. So like it's, I think it explains itself, but basically it's kind of like an idea as to how you can map keywords, identify gaps, map out like rich pages that don't have any keyword targeting, etc. And like there's a bit of a guide to it, and then good old like almost would say like a later fashion, but like, I mean, for those that have kind of been following her, and I think there's a high chance that you have, and if you're an SEO, like she oftentimes builds like those Google spreadsheets that you can just simply copy, paste, and then it kind of adjust to your needs. I think one of the things that I kind of have recommended a lot for people in the past was also like this checklist for migrations, and that was one of the things that kind of is actually quite a bit older, but yeah, like extremely useful if you don't have like, I don't know, an agency or a partner, someone to kind of help you with your migration work. It can give like a great guidance in the structured process, and this kind of somewhat works similar, identifying different types of keywords, from transactional to navigational and whatnot. We're going to talk about that because there's another really nice and cool guide that came out some days ago. But anyways, so like, intent mapping, but also like, section mapping, page mapping, etc., and which is like a funny kind of coincidence, really, because that's one of the things that I kind of, on the panel that I mentioned at the event last week. So we talked about, in the panel, we talked about like entities and schema and like mapping those types of things. And I think one of the things that my fellow co-panelist Viola mentioned, that I think I actually asked her about it, was like, what has changed for you in like, in terms of keyword research and kind of keyword mapping? Because obviously, like, what people don't understand when we talk about entities is that kind of we're somewhat moving away from like a single keyword concept more towards like a topical or cluster concept, I think, which is what you guys are doing as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. So this is why I found exactly this one super interesting, like the keyword mapping cheat sheet, because this is like a huge topic for us. So for ongoing clients as well, all the time, whenever we think about like content strategies, especially when it comes to e-commerce, and especially, or even more especially, when it comes to, I have a case just at the moment with one of our clients where it's an e-commerce client where we have, or writing a concept about where to or how to set up like a proper content strategy based on there's like content on the shop sites, of course, based on the category, but there's also always a part like buying advisors, if that makes sense.
Buying guides,
with like buying guides, and some of them are currently on a magazine part, some of them are on any kind of like there is an insights directory, then one for a magazine, then we have like the content on the shop sites and then on the categories, and so this is such a huge topic, and this is why we have like our own templates, of course, and then I took this one here, like the cheat sheet, and to compare all of those together to make even like a better concept out of it.
And it's really a complex beast, isn't it? I mean, at the end, especially, I think what I'm curious what you think, but like I feel that it's like one of the big problems is, especially if you have like large legacy kind of sites and assets, right? As you said, like there's magazines, there's or it's called blog or whatever. Then you have category pieces. Then you have like sometimes content on like specific landing pages that either sit here or sit there or sit both. And I kind of to map that out into like one unified strategy is such a kind of massive task these days. But I think it's also equally important, right? Because I mean, you gave a great example, right? The problem if you have like buyers guides with a very transactional intent, not like a comparative intent, sitting in an insights directly, just to kind of take an extreme example. This is so far away from the conversion.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's I think it's complex beast, as you called it, in terms of like auditing all the stuff. This is the one thing, like finding out which kind of content pieces are already out there, on which kind of sections, which kind of intent do we see, and where is the consumer. I mean, also out of an UX perspective, right? So this is another question. So where to place in a right order, like those like buying advisor content pieces. But then this is the one task to audit all of those things, and then to send out something like recommendations. So you should organize everything and put those type of contents over there. But then what happens afterwards? Then you have still like a team in-house or at our client side, which of course continues to write even more content. And then if you do not have something like a proper like overview, keyword mapping sheet, whatever, they will continue to do exactly the same. So, and then 1 year later, you have exactly the same situation. You do exactly the same, right?
I think, and what brings in even more complexity nowadays, at least that's kind of my impression, like when Google understands like entities, or Google being generally understanding entities a bit better, like you also have like the, so I mean, there is implicit and explicit intent, right? For like explicit intent, like if you say like buy X, Y, Z, it's easy because that intent is never going to change by definition, because you have this kind of part of the like a keyword or a phrase or whatever. But like if you have something super generic, I don't know, Audi RS5, like do I want to, because people like
of course it's
anyhow, so let's say you're an Audi fan by chance. Then I mean the question is, what do you want when you look at that, right? Do you want like what do you want, like just the visuals of the new version that's coming up and with a release date of like next year, or do you want like actually kind of, do you want to buy one, or do you want kind of a leasing contract, or do you just want to compare it with like another top car of like Mercedes? I mean, no one should do that, but anyways. So I think those kind of things, right? And so the intent there really can shift. So like what we have seen in the past, like especially for like ultra generic searches, I think back in the day, like when you were searching for, just to stick with the Audi example, I think if you looked at the top 10, like before an update and then after an update, what we saw is like all of a sudden Google kind of changed the implicit intent, and that meant like the top 10, like the first 3 were still the same, was brand, but then all of a sudden like position 4 to like 8 or whatever, I can't recall what it was, but like they got kind of completely shuffled and exchanged because they kind of, Google changed the implicit intent. It was like assuming, okay, if you search for the brand, you want maybe informational, and at some point you maybe want transactional, right? So, and this is also like a huge problem with content, right? If you have like generic content that's built around one intent, and then the intent shifts, and all of a sudden you're not relevant anymore. So I think kind of the maintenance task is also a complexity that comes in even later as well. So yeah, I really like the guide. I have to say, like she put in like a lot of kind of effort and work. So well done there.
Yeah, highly recommended, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to share that, of course, as always. Another really good piece, I have to say, is kind of came out just 4 days ago. So 1st of May is technically not even part of the April recap, but anyhow, by a lady called Olga Zasekna. I'm just gonna not try it because I'm gonna butcher your name anyways, Olga. My apologies. Anyways, I mean, we all do love, especially on the tech side, like a good bit of tools, and like we kind of work with a lot of them. And I think this one is a bit more specific on Sitebulb, which I think is a phenomenal tool as well. For those that are not familiar with it, this is more like a desktop kind of solution, similar to a Screaming Frog. Yeah, very, very different functionality. I mean, some stuff is obviously the same, but like a bit of a different way of how they deal with certain things, which is also a reason why we're actually using both. So it's a really nice piece, and a nice piece of software. So kind of Olga put together kind of a like how to perform an SEO audit with Sitebulb. More on a generic side, to be fair, but I think it's because I think like I've been saying that a lot, and I really think that's very important. Kind of is that an audit is not an audit, it's not an audit, and it's a lot about audience. It's a lot about like, is it an audit for e-com? Again, kind of the same discussion as an audit for publishing. But like here, she has like some very generic, and I would say almost like always true kind of things that she's looking at and kind of recommending to look at, and how to do that actually with Sitebulb. So I think kind of the target audience here is a bit more like either Sitebulb users, or like if you maybe not have a crawler, need kind of a low entrance into this entire crawling, you maybe don't want to kind of can't invest into a SaaS platform, which is fair enough, right? And this can be like a very hands-on and handy guide to kind of go through it. And I'm going to spare you like generic stuff, but like there's a bit of installation and manuals, like how to do that, etc. And then like how you can like extract different types of data, from GA, from GSC, so like all the stuff that you have for free anyways, as well as some custom extractions, right? Taken from the sitemaps, extract like the structured data, etc. So like a bit of around like the setup, and then as you can see on the right hand side, it's a very, very, very long piece, but really nicely done with kind of charts and like what you can get out of the charts and how it works, etc. So yeah, and of course, Sitebulb being a tech platform with a strong focus on kind of technical SEO. But yeah, if you either new to the topic or you kind of need a bit of inspiration as to what other people are looking at in terms of, tech SEO auditing, I think this is a highly recommended read. It's very thorough, yet keep in mind it's a bit generic. There might be, some things that not always are 100% relevant for your business, but I think it's a fantastic way to kind of get to grips with Sitebulb. So yeah, have a look, give it a try. I think it's worth doing that. Another really good piece and that goes back to a bit of kind of to our discussion right now about like implicit and explicit intent, but there was a piece that none other that Cyrus Shepard put live on Moz, actually, kind of talking about click-based signals is what he called it. I think it's essentially translated, or you could translate it, and I don't want to go into that entire debate because we will have it in the future. Like the SEO community will never see eye on eye to this, but like it's more around like, is Google actually using kind of UX signals or metrics, and how are they potentially different? For some, again, bounce rate might be relevant. For some verticals it might not be. The opposite could be true for time on site. For long it's a long time. For some it's a long time on site. For others it's a short time on site. That would mark like this goal has been, or the user's goal has been achieved, etc. But essentially, it's kind of Cyrus going through his theory on how he thinks Google might be doing that. But to be fair, he says like, exactly how Google uses engagement signals, clicks, interaction, which is what I meant with time on site, etc., or non-interaction, either way, right? Yeah, I agree. It's subject to an endless debate, but there's some suggestions in various ways, and I'm a strong believer that they do. But again, that's my belief. Either way, but it's definitely worth a read if you kind of want to get a bit of an understanding. Because what I really like about the piece, and that's why I kind of put it in here, and I think the headline already says it, is he's differentiating and not like trying to find a one fits all, because that I think is, by my understanding and also by kind of our experience with client sites and how different they are, there is no one fits all like solution. But and it's not just this CTR debate. So is it going to be CTR, or is it something entirely else? But a bit more context, and it gives a bit of like more differentiation on like why for certain searches, or let's say certain types of searches, I think to be more precise, various different data points such as including engagement might be actually the right thing, and kind of he's suggesting why Google might actually be doing that. So it's a very long read, but also brings in, and this is what I really like, a lot of like hands-on advice on different things and what you can do to actually improve those, kind of how to be the last click actually, and not have the situation that you are essentially the second last. So that means if someone goes to your site, user expectation not fulfilled, going back and then going to another site, worst case your competitor, and that person or site is then the last click. So there's some really nice kind of hands-on advice and concepts explained in here. So yeah, again, worth having a read. Kind of ties in quite nicely. So if you go into this keyword research topic a bit more, then this is a good kind of primer and a good read to just kind of get a bit of the bigger picture context here. Certainly a good way to start. This is just a brief and quick mention. It's not very techy, but it somewhat goes into the same direction. So our friends over at SearchPilot, which is kind of in like a split testing platform, so to speak, they kind of share like, and again, it fits quite nicely, kind of share like a recent test setup that they've monitored. And this goes again goes around content and content creation, and then again going back to our keyword discussion that we just had. So kind of once you've done your homework, and once you've done your research and your mapping, I mean, what oftentimes happens, at least with us, is of course that kind of translates into some kind of, and you said it already earlier, Dominic, like it kind of translates into some kind of content work that needs to be done, right? Consolidation, recreation, new things, mergers, whatever that can be, deletion. I don't know. And what they did here is basically kind of share. And I think, it's a bit of data, so it doesn't make much sense for me to kind of talk you through it. But like basically, they kind of share the comparison of what they had, which is kind of the kind of control, and then different variants of new content, basically kind of extended, or with different types of formatting or elements added into the mix. And I think this is also one thing that I kind of feel like most people actually don't do enough, which is also what kind of we launched the kind of Peak A's lab actually years and years ago. It's kind of like, testing things and not just believing in the fact, okay, like now I've done my, my keyword research and I take all that for granted, and like adding another 250 words is good enough. Like it might also, and you mentioned it, right, it might impact UX negatively. Therefore, potentially even the longer content results in, lower CTR, or like on-site CTR or like on-site conversion. And that's kind of what the test reflects. So I think this is actually quite smart. And I mean, even if you're not using a platform, you can do it on your own and on the cheap, right? You could just go and say, look, okay, I'm going to roll out like, I don't know, 15 or 10 of those like new kind of content pieces. I mean, of course, that's not like a clinical, clean, so to speak, testing environment, but I mean, at least it gives you an idea before you kind of run into one direction, like push out like 100 new pieces, and then you've done it all for nothing, right?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that reminds me that I didn't find the time to test like the A/B testing tool from Write. So they just
they
launched
also pushed out something. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they pushed it out like 4 weeks ago or something like this, and I also started to set up something for one of our clients, but I do not have like major results until now because I didn't find the time to check on this. But super interesting. I mean, of course, as you mentioned, there is never like the perfect testing environment for something like this, like for A/B testing content or something like this. But I think as long as you start to do any kind of monitoring or testing in terms of content changes, it's a good thing, right?
Yeah, but, absolutely.
It's also super interesting. Because this is a major fault, because many people, of course, think like, okay, now I've done my homework, I've done like the proper research, and now I have the content strategy, I update or optimize or merge my content pieces, and then my work is done. Of course, that's never the case. Yeah. So pretty interesting.
No, I agree. I mean, maybe we could just ask our the friends over at Write to kind of see if we can get like things set up in the future. Kind of talk about testing specifically, because you're right. I've also not seen their feature yet, but I think it's actually a really good idea to kind of have it out of your platform, so to speak. I mean, I know like, so Tom Anthony is one of the kind of masterminds behind SearchPilot, and I mean, like they do some really advanced testing, like kind of testing setups as well. But I mean, as you said, like even if it's not as complex, it's better than doing nothing. So no, but that's a good topic. We put it on the list for the future, and I'm going to see if we can get people here to kind of talk about that in a bit more detail, because I think this is one thing that's really underestimated, like in SEO. But so have a look here. It's a good prime. I think they also have a bunch of other case studies on the site where you can also talk about common pitfalls of like technical setups for testing, etc. So that's definitely worth it. Then a quick shout out to another actually friend in Berlin, funny enough, Philly Wiese, actually ex-Googler himself, also very much on the tech SEO side these days, works as a consultant. And there's one topic that's been talked about quite a lot in context of web performance, core web vitals, you know the drill. And he put out like a free CLS, so cumulative layout shift debugger, which is quite nice. You just put in an URL and then it kind of gives you a better explanation of most other tools out there. So kind of what elements are moving around, why are they moving around, etc. Really helpful. Just have a look on that. And then there's this is kind of tying in quite nicely. Probably should have done the other way around, but anyways, one topic which really amused me kind of at the same time, obviously, because I think we talked about it, and I think I had it with Arnold last week as well. Like, I mean, this entire situation around core web vitals being a ranking factor, now all of a sudden they're maybe not that important anymore. And well, Google says, well, maybe we don't expect that much of an impact. Let's not go there, but what I really like is the guide that Jamie put together here, which is like a very, very thorough and long read on all things core web vitals. It doesn't stop. I'm just going to scroll through and scroll through and scroll. So yeah, it's a ton of things on, and this is actually quite cool because like she always kind of gave very practical examples as to how to fix certain things, but then broken down based on the different kind of types of core web vitals, which is kind of something that I've done in my web performance talks as well, because I think what people really need is kind of hands-on advice on kind of the most common scenarios. However, to be fair, the issue with web performance really is that it's so much specific to the setup, the system, like, CMSs, like the libraries that are being kind of pulled in. Are you relying on kind of third-party fonts, blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole bunch of different things. So there's not really one fits all solution, but this piece is probably one of the most thorough ones that I've seen in kind of recent months. So definitely worth having a look. So that's on Search Engine John, and another piece there, which kind of the guys from Only put out. So Tomek in this case is kind of a top 5 crawl stats insights. So this is based on we covered that in, I think, the March episodes, like the new crawl stats insights that Google launched in GSC. So this is why I just kind of thought it would make sense for some of you to kind of follow up on it, like kind of top 5 insights on what you can read out of the data, how's it being crawled, kind of some breakdowns and what you can learn from that. What it's going to tell you, what can you do about it. So yeah, again, quite nice, like how to kind of deal with those anomalies and like curves that somewhat look a bit different from like the normal kind of charts that you would expect to see, etc. So again, very good piece, very techy, kind of really mid of April, but certainly up to speed. Our friends from IRA in the UK did something that goes a bit into the same direction. We just talked about like the need for specific kind of tailored approaches to certain different verticals and industries. This one is actually quite cool as well. So it's more on the it's more on the e-com angle, and yeah, it's quite funny that a lot of people are picking up on that. I think just because there's so much demand for e-com businesses, really. So I think it makes sense to kind of go down that route. Similar approach, a bit of a cheat sheet that kind of goes into what elements are really relevant. How can you like perfectly optimize that. I've done this like in a similar fashion at my SMX talk, where I kind of more talked about like the monitoring side of it. So what kind of elements would you kind of want to monitor and understand a bit better and see if they change? Like, I don't know, availability of products, right? So when are they coming back? Is the price correct, or is it maybe like an error in the database and you kind of give this away for like a crazy small amount and whatnot? So there's like a whole bunch of things, I think. And kind of a similar approach is why I really like the guide, I have to say. That Patty put together here on like how to kind of make that work. What do you need to kind of really have sorted out with a specific kind of focus on e-com. So that's something that you definitely should have a look at if you're doing or if you're running kind of an e-com business or you're working for an e-com business. I guess either way. Just on a quick side note, that was already early on in April, data filtering comparison in Search Console. And I think another thing that kind of came out was regular expressions, where people kind of went completely crazy over. I mean, granted, it was about time that because like the previous filter mechanisms were like really shit. So or next to non-existent. However, the regex are also a bit weird right now. Like they have some strange limitations. As for those that understand how to write regex, it's a bit weird. But at least they work better than they kind of used to before. So kind of Google is making kind of continuous progress on GSC and the GSC data. So certainly something that you should keep in mind. Equally, at the same time, there were some changes in Search Console. If you haven't seen that, on the anomalies page, there's some of the details, so you can have a look. I think it's very specific to those that are somewhat affected, but like sometimes you wonder, right, like the scale of curves changed so drastically, you can't find out why. So this is kind of documented here. And then the last one is another kind of bit of a techie piece, really, on site migrations. And we kind of had a dedicated session on that, so we're not gonna go through it in its entirety, but there's two things that I really found worth sharing in this one as well. Is where is it? There we go. Yeah, there's some examples also, kind of, if it would be loading. I don't know why it's not loading. There's some examples, because oftentimes, like, if you work on migration, you need to build out cases. It's still not loading. We shall see. Anyhow, it's linked in the post, so I hope later it does work, or maybe I can refresh it. Let's see. It's a data studio, which is it's a data studio that's very slow. I don't know why, but anyhow, the PDF is linked here as well, so I'm sure you're gonna find it. But basically, it has some cases of like recent migrations. They were like mainly UK focused, so fair enough. But it gives you a bit of an idea of how like those visibility shifts and curves are supposed to look like or not look like. And this is actually what I really liked, like a site migration loss calculator, basically. So it kind of takes data, because that's the thing, right? Like people, business owners or like management, oftentimes kind of needs an understanding of what's gonna happen or not happen. How does it impact my business for what period of time? I mean, we've been doing so many risk assessments over the last years of saying, like, look, this is best case, realistic case, worst case, with like certain corridors and thresholds and whatnot. But I've not seen anyone kind of publish something like this publicly. So kind of what they do here is basically it's a data studio. You can copy the report. You will need to have, of course, a Google account, and then it kind of can kind of do the calculation based on your GA data, which is quite cool. So like traffic, conversion rates, values, and then it kind of gives you like similar to what I've been saying, like they kind of give you drop estimations for like a certain period of time. So like 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever. So like this is actually quite cool, quite handy. So if you're working on migrations or you have something up and coming, I think it's a quite smart approach to at least put some numbers behind it. I mean, we all know it's somewhat a bit crystal ball, and like the numbers are. I mean, he says it. Chris says it here as well. Like some migrations really show like a very short, like 60% drop. But then, like on the other hand, like so kind of when we kind of do this times of kind of risk assessments, we would always also kind of go like with a 30% kind of a drop over a period of like, I don't know, 6 weeks, and then you have like a bit of a recovery phase, etc. So I mean, the timeframes obviously they can vary, and they depend on complexity. If we're kind of talking about that a lot, like there's so many different types of migrations. How many different subtypes do you have? Is it just a simple move of something? Is it something much more complex? New system, new templates, new domain. I don't know what. So I think that of course needs to be factored into like the calculation as well. But or is it international? Is it just one market? Is it multinational? Etc. Right? So, but the approach is quite cool, especially for like I would say more standard types of migrations. One domain to the other, or one template change for the other. So that's quite helpful and quite nice as to to estimate and understand some of the I'd say like impact that could potentially happen. What I was missing, but I haven't fully kind of had the chance to play with it actually, is like one of the things that I always find fascinating when you talk about migrations is that people like really they are afraid, and I think sometimes rightfully so, or they have certain respect because of the complexity of such task, which I think is fair enough, right? But what also oftentimes happens is that kind of this mindset that's missing. That what you do is basically you build out a foundation for like growth in the future, right? So I think there also needs, and I think you guys have been doing that a lot as well. Like you're kind of building out a strategy piece that kind of follows after, where the migration is part of the strategy actually. So you can grow from that basis. And that's often missing. Like when you say like, well, I don't want to lose anything. Okay, fair enough, right? But I mean, even if you have the dip, what you want essentially, you want the growth out of the dip. There's not much you can do about dip anyways, because Google needs to reprocess. Signals need to be kind of passed along, inherited. The kind of the algorithms need to understand certain changes and whatnot. So there's not much you can do about it, right? But what you certainly need to do is you kind of need to set up yourself for like the growth after that happens.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I kind of really like the approach to kind of putting some numbers to it, and kind of talking through
very interesting.
with business owners on that front. Yeah. And I think that kind of covers the like news from what we had on last month. I mean, there's obviously a ton of things going on, but those were at least my highlights. I think
highlights,
the must reads of what I think was out there. Yeah, I think for those that kind of don't know it, just a quick shout out to Elada with her newsletter. Another of those freebies, like the newsletter Elada does, is also fantastic. If you kind of don't have much time, you just need some of a gist of what's happening, go sign up, and then you kind of get it delivered to your inbox. Either way works, I guess, but yeah, definitely worth doing that as well. All right, I think that pretty much marks it for the week. Yeah, as we said, next week PPC, be there, don't miss it. It's going to be a bit more hands-on again. So I'm going to talk about ad copy and like some of the common mistakes and things that you probably should avoid, but also like some tips and tricks on that's what you need to do on that front. So both dial in. We're going to be back on Tuesday, 4 p.m. German time. The notes are there. Managed. See, there we go. PA.AG session notes. I'm getting better at that. Again, as long as it's not going this way, that is fine, right? That's just what's never working out. Like with the mirrored camera lenses.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather not gonna try. So yeah, dial in next week. We're gonna be back. Looking forward to your feedback as always. And with that said, we're gonna be out for the week. Cheers. Bye bye.
See you next week. Bye bye.